Hello, and welcome to the Computer Electronic Accommodations Program's webinar on the reissuance of Department of Defense Instruction, or DoDI 6025.22. This instruction covers the role of Assistive Technology, or AT, in the recovery and rehabilitation of wounded, ill, and injured service members. I'm John Sanders, and presenting with me today is Eric Gasparoni.
Hello, everyone.
Now, this webinar is intended for our representatives at military treatment facilities, MTFs, and Wounded Warrior programs. Now, the purpose of the webinar is to provide an overview of DoDI 6025.22, including changes that are in the reissued instruction with specific attention to what action is required on the part of our partners to be in compliance with the DoDI.
We will begin by providing a history and context for CAP and the DoDI, and then we will walk through the newly reissued instruction, paying particular attention to what has changed and actions required to partner with CAP. We will then conclude with next steps and some resources to assist our partners.
So we'll begin by giving a little bit of history of the Computer Electronic Accommodations Program, better known as CAP, to give context to the DoDI.
CAP was established in fiscal year 1990 by the Department of Defense to be the program that provides assistive technology as workplace accommodations. CAP is centrally funded, meaning CAP provided assistive technology and related accommodations come at no cost to the agency to which they are being provided.
Now, in 2000, CAP was granted authority to expand its services and provide workplace accommodations to other federal agencies that form partnerships with CAP. Now, CAP now provides services to all of DoD and 68 partnering federal executive departments and agencies.
In 2004, CAP's scope was again expanded with the Wounded Service Member Initiative, or WSM initiative. The initiative was established to support service members injured in support of the global war on terror and later to support the overseas contingency operations by allowing CAP to provide AT during their recovery and rehabilitation.
Now, before getting into the details of the instruction and how CAP operates, let's take a moment to ensure everyone has the same baseline information about assistive technology. Now, assistive technology, or AT, is defined as any item, piece of equipment, or product system which is used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of individuals with functional limitations. Now, CAP's role is to provide AT as part of the recovery and rehabilitation process for service members. CAP was well suited for this role since CAP already provided this technology to federal employees as a form of reasonable accommodation for workplace tasks.
For service members, we've found that some AT has been very helpful in recovery and return to work. So we're going to give a few examples to help frame the scope of what and why we provide AT.
First example is that CAP provides devices to service members with dexterity impairments, including those who've sustained nerve damage, fractures, burns, and amputations to their upper extremities. AT may include compact keyboards, alternative pointing devices, and voice recognition software.
For service members with traumatic brain injury or TBI, closed head injuries, or post-traumatic stress disorder, CAP can provide various memory cueing aids to individuals that struggle with memory loss and other cognitive difficulties. Cueing aids can assist service members in remembering appointments, medication schedules, and also personal contact information. This is just one example of what CAP can do, and more information on other limitations can be provided upon request.
So initially, when service members received AT from CAP, they weren't allowed to keep what was provided to them after their separation from active duty. They were required to return the accommodations provided and request the same AT from the VA. This was an inefficient and understandably frustrating process for separating service members.
This issue was corrected when the DoD released the Department of Defense Instruction 6025.22 in 2008. The new instruction established policy, assigned responsibilities, and provided procedures for establishing AT programs within the DoD. In essence, the instruction paved the way for CAP to partner with the military health system to provide AT. In support of Section 561 of Public Law 109-364, the instruction also provided procedures to allow for the AT to become the property of the service members upon separation from active service.
Now, with the introduction of DoDI 6025.22, CAP established and maintained partnerships with 53 MTFs and has provided AT to recovering wounded, ill, and injured service members at those locations. However, over time, the landscape of DoD recovery and rehabilitation services and coordination has changed. This led to the renewal process to update the DoD AT program's model. We'll spend the rest of our time reviewing the reissued instruction and clarifying updates, responsibilities, and procedures.
On January 30th, 2015, DoDI 6025.22 was reissued with new policies for establishing AT programs in coordination with the Military Health System and the Recovery Coordination Program. We will review the revised DoDI step by step, including the purpose, applicability, policy, responsibilities, and procedures sections. The full instruction can also be found online at the DoD Directives website listed on the screen.
So the first section of the DoDI describes the purpose of the instruction. The first purpose of the DoDI is to establish policy, responsibilities, and procedures for establishing AT programs in coordination with the Military Health System, or MHS, and the Recovery Coordination Program. The second purpose is to provide support for an interdependent AT system between the DoD Human Resource Activities CAP, the Military Health System, and Wounded Warrior programs.
These purpose statements highlight two important differences from the original DoDI. The first is that CAP is now a component of the DoD Human Resources Activity, or DHRA. CAP transitioned from the TRICARE management activity to DHRA in October 2012. CAP now works in coordination with the MHS, whereas before it was operating within the MHS.
Now, the second difference is the inclusion of Wounded Warrior programs and the Recovery Coordination Program. When DoD Instruction 1300.24 Recovery Coordination Program was issued in December of 2009, new policies, guidelines, procedures, and standards were established for the care, management, and transition of recovering service members across the military departments. Now, a main result of the Recovery Coordination Program was the creation or coordination of Wounded Warrior programs, including Warrior Transition Units, Warrior Transition Brigades, or other Wounded Warrior programs. Now, under the reissued DoDI 6025.22, Wounded Warrior programs will now have the same kind of partnerships with CAP that MTFs have. There are some procedural differences between the two partnership types, and we'll highlight those differences later in the procedures section of this webinar.
DoDI 6025.22 applies to the Office of the Secretary of Defense, the military departments, including the Coast Guard at all times, Office of the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Joint Staff, combatant commands, the Office of the Inspector General of the Department of Defense, defense agencies, defense field activities, and other DoD organizational entities. This group is collectively referred to as DoD components.
Now, the next section of the DoDI establishes policy for implementing AT programs. First policy is that strategies for utilizing AT during rehabilitation must be aligned with generally accepted standards for health promotion and maximum functional outcomes.
The second policy is that MTFs and Wounded Warrior programs must incorporate AT into rehabilitative services programs as part of an organization-wide interdisciplinary adoption of computer and telecommunication accessibility practices. These two policies don't represent any major differences from the original DoDI, aside from the fact that Wounded Warrior programs are now included in the policy.
Third policy states for whom MTFs and Wounded Warrior programs must assess and provide AT services. These individuals are wounded, ill, and injured service members who are either enrolled in their respective Wounded Warrior programs or were referred to the Integrated Disability System and partnering in the Education and Employment Initiative or Operation Warfighter programs for federal employment opportunities. This third policy updates DoDI 6025.22 to incorporate both the recovery coordination programs and the programs I just mentioned.
The next section outlines the responsibilities that various parties have as a result of the DoDI. Here we list the offices and positions in the instruction, but we won't go into detail here on what the responsibilities are. We prefer to use our time to speak to the procedures section of the instruction, as that is more applicable to the work that is being done in the MTFs and through Wounded Warrior programs.
So, as Eric just mentioned, the information most likely to be used by our partners at MTFs and Wounded Warrior programs is included in the procedures section, as it outlines what actions are necessary to be in compliance with the DoDI. We'll begin with CAPS procedures, then procedures for MTFs and Wounded Warrior programs, and finally discuss commonalities to both MTFs and Wounded Warrior programs. Now, first, CAP must provide needs assessments and procure and deliver AT to MTF or Wounded Warrior program locations. This comes at no cost to the MTF or Wounded Warrior program. Now, this is what CAP's been doing for service members under the old instruction, but now it includes the Wounded Warrior programs. CAP can only provide accommodations that allow for accessing the information technology environment. So this means CAP cannot provide medical, therapeutic, or mobility devices. CAP must also provide resources to MTFs and Wounded Warrior programs to conduct their own needs assessments and integrate AT into the rehabilitation process. Now, CAP staff will also provide training on CAP services and AT program to MTFs and Wounded Warrior programs. This webinar is actually part of that training. CAP also publishes a Wounded, Ill, and Injured Service Members Handbook, which can be found online under the DoD Instruction tab at www.cap.mil/WSM. Now, CAP provides ongoing support services to service members up until the point when he or she separates from active duty. Then, AT received from CAP becomes property of the service member upon separation. Now, CAP will create and distribute an annual report at the end of the calendar year to MTF commanders and Wounded Warrior program leaders describing the accommodations provided, including how much money was saved as a result of the partnership with CAP. This is something we've done for years and will continue to do under this reissued instruction for both MTF and Wounded Warrior program leaders.
Now let's focus on the procedures that an MTF must follow according to the reissued DoDI. MTFs will incorporate CAP into any AT programs. MTFs will also establish a coordinated plan for ensuring eligible service members have access to AT services and equipment as part of the existing rehab services programs. This AT plan will incorporate the CAP partnership and integration of AT into recovery and rehabilitation, the introduction of reemployment through utilization of AT after injury or illness, and on-site inventory management procedures, if applicable. Any AT plans must be shared with the CAP office by sending them to cap.wsm@mail.mil. These procedures assist an MTF in providing on-site CAP inventory to expedite access to AT. If you need extra guidance on how to create an AT plan, please email us for assistance. The next required procedure is for a CAP representative to be designated as a point of contact for the CAP partnership. The MTF representative should be someone with a relevant clinical background, either a medical or rehabilitation professional, or a case manager. They will also coordinate AT needs assessments, on-site inventory, as well as other CAP-related services. This will be accomplished by filling out DD Form 2988, the CAP Partnership Representative Form, which can be found online at the WHS Forms website. The form can be requested at any time, but we will also provide a link at the end of this webinar. By filling out this form, CAP will have a designated responsible official for partnership coordination and will begin supporting the MTF under the reissued DoDI 6025.22. The final procedure unique to MTFs is to integrate the provision of AT and utilization into the electronic medical record system. This will allow the impact of AT to be better understood in the rehabilitation process.
Next, we will move on to procedures that are unique to Wounded Warrior programs. The first procedure for Wounded Warrior programs is to incorporate CAP into the support services as part of the service member's transition. The second requirement is to establish an AT plan to support rehabilitation and transition services to ensure eligible service members have access to AT services. Now, these AT plans can be shared with the CAP office. If you need any help creating an AT plan, please email us at cap.wsm@mail.mil. Now, the final procedure for Wounded Warrior programs is to designate a CAP representative by completing DD Form 2988. Now, unlike MTFs, this individual can be a case manager or another individual who provides support to wounded, ill, and injured service members and will coordinate AT needs assessments and related CAP services to confirm eligible service members receive appropriate accommodations.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground about policies, responsibilities, and unique procedures for CAP, MTFs, and Wounded Warrior programs. So now we're going to cover some procedures in the DoDI that are common to both MTFs and Wounded Warrior programs. MTFs and Wounded Warrior programs should identify when CAP staff members are required to assist in the needs assessment process. This process helps evaluate the AT needs of service members and is really important to providing the most appropriate tools for the service member. Submit AT requests to CAP using the CAP Accommodation Request form. We strongly prefer to receive the AT requests via our online submission process, which is available at the CAP Wounded, Ill, and Injured Service Members website, www.cap.mil/WSM. Document in the service member's record when he or she receives AT devices or services, and also provide independent verification or property receipt back to CAP. This records the property being accepted by the MTF or Wounded Warrior program. Furthermore, it is the responsibility of the MTF or Wounded Warrior program to record the transfer of property, either to the service member upon his or her separation from active service, or to his or her next duty station if he or she returns to active service.
So now that we've reviewed how to establish a partnership with CAP under this instruction, let's talk about how to get the most out of the partnership. To start, we recommend the following steps. First, have an in-service briefing for your team on today's available AT and needs assessment services from CAP. If that isn't an option at this point, we do have a few on-demand resources we can offer until an in-service briefing can be scheduled. This training will include details regarding the partnership, needs assessments, AT, and CAP's resources to support MTFs and Wounded Warrior programs.
Next, we are open to working with you to provide an executive-level briefing for your senior leadership regarding the partnership and what CAP can do to augment your current services. After that, we're going to get into the heart of our services. We'll begin providing the needs assessments and fulfilling requests for AT for service members. Now that we have covered the requirements of the DoDI, we would like to offer you some next steps.
The first step is to designate a CAP representative, even if you had one previously under the old DoDI. At MTFs, this is an individual with relevant clinical background, which may include medical or rehabilitation professionals or case managers. At Wounded Warrior programs, this may be any individual who provides support to wounded, ill, and injured service members, including case managers or other professionals associated with the program. Second, please contact CAP with questions about sample AT plans, working with CAP, setting up a meeting or other form of in-service, or obtaining outreach materials that will help you spread awareness to make your partnership task as easy as possible.
So before we wrap up, we wanted to provide you a list of a few of the key resources listed during this webinar and their associated links. This includes our CAP service member website, the CAP online request form, as well as the Service Member Initiative Handbook.
In closing, we want to thank you for viewing this webinar. And if you have any questions about any of the content, please contact CAP by phone at 703-614-8416 or by email at cap.wsm@mail.mil.